situation. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne. You are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Residue is not just another true crime podcast, but a necessary tool for those who want to understand the dangers lurking in the real world. Residue is created, hosted, edited, researched, and produced by me, Chrissy Champagne. If you could do me a little favor and just hit that follow button, and just to remind you and just to thank you, I'll sing you a little song. Do you guys remember Uncle Cracker? Follow me, everything is alright. I'll be the one to tuck you in at night, and you should hear that follow button for me. Actually, I do want to start another podcast where I tell you scary stories to fall asleep to. I'll be the one to tuck you in at night. Yeah, do you guys think that's a good idea? Also, if you were really cool, you'd go on over to Instagram and follow me at Residue Podcast, and then TikTok at Residue, a true crime podcast. There is also a Facebook page called Residue, a true crime podcast. Okay, we're like 43 seconds in and I haven't even started this story yet. I'm just telling you what to do. Follow me here, follow me there. Oh yeah, also can you leave me 5 stars? A 5-star review is the greatest gift that you can give to the podcast. Okay, you guys, as you know, listener discretion is always advised. Parsippany Troy Hills, commonly known as Parsippany, is a quiet township in northern New Jersey. This is the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, it's a sleepy town, and nothing ever happens. On November 23rd, 1982, 17-year-old Amy Hoffman walked through a parking lot and vanished into the night. Parsippany Troy Hills is the largest township in Morris County, and not much happens here outside of high school sports. Frank and Florence Hoffman thought they had built the perfect life. In 1942, Florence married Frank, a Korean War veteran, and they raised 2 daughters in the kind of house that people can only dream about. And in 1969, they opened their hearts even further, adopting 5-year-old Amy from South Korea. By 1982, Amy was the epitome of a Jersey girl. She was popular, smart, kind, captain of the cheerleading squad. She worked part-time at a store called Sunrise. It was a little boutique in the Rockaway Town Square Mall. And on November 22nd, just 3 days before homecoming, Amy woke up feeling sick. So since the big game was coming up that weekend, Amy decided to stay home from school and rest. And she actually ended up having a pretty relaxing and fantastic day with her mother. They just laid around, talked a lot. And by the next morning, Amy was still feeling kind of off, but she was a hard worker and a go-getter. She knew she had to get herself up, get to school, and then she had cheer practice. And then after cheer practice, she was going to have to go to the mall to work her 5 to 9 shift at the Sunrise Boutique. So Amy arrived at school around 12 p.m. She got there in time for lunch with her friends. She then went to cheer practice around 4:30. Cheer practice ended, and she had to be at the mall by 5 p.m. It was just a typical work day for Amy. She arrived a little bit after 5. She said hello to her friend Christine Gonzalez that worked next door at a different store. She left her job around 8 p.m. to go down to the food court and grab a little food for a break. She sat there with another mall employee for a bit. And then Amy went upstairs to close the store. It was around 9 p.m. As Amy was leaving and she was going down the escalator, another coworker asked her if she could possibly get a ride home. But Amy said no, because she had plans to get a perm from her mother that night. And her mother needed her to get home as quick as she possibly can after work. So it is dark. It is quiet in this parking lot because most of the stores have already closed down. Amy is walking across this mall parking lot alone. And unbeknownst to her, someone was watching her. As Amy goes to get into her vehicle, there is a man watching her, and he is waiting for her. Amy was expected to be home by 9:45 p.m. It is now 10:15 p.m. and her mother is getting worried. So her mother drives to the mall to look for Amy, and she spots her car in the parking lot. She goes up to the car, notices that the door is unlocked, Amy's book bag is on the car seat, and Amy's keys are still in the ignition. As her mother, Florence, starts freaking out, calling police, and then also trying to get anyone from inside the mall, security, anyone to come help her. She is told by two employees, they did notice that a later model green Chevrolet was parked right next to Amy's car in the parking lot that night. And inside of that car, they saw a man with dark hair just sitting alone in his car. And this stood out to them because they thought it was strange that the man was just sitting there and not moving. He was parked next to one of the only cars in the parking lot, Amy's. And it is completely unclear to me as to why these two employees didn't warn Amy or walk with Amy or say something sooner about the strange man that they saw sitting next to a 17-year-old girl's vehicle. Patrolman William Plate responds and shows up to the mall parking lot. He brings with him a tracking dog, and this dog catches Amy's scent but loses it very quickly. Now, he picks up on Amy's scent right by her car, and within 2 spaces away from her car, her scent vanishes. Nobody has any idea where Amy is. Thanksgiving Day comes. Homecoming comes. The cheer squad has to perform without Amy. The entire community is just going on like nothing is wrong. They're trying to keep up a good front, but they just can't celebrate. I mean, the football team wins, and it's a blowout win. It is 47-0. Nobody can celebrate. They don't want this. They just want to know where Amy is. And soon the celebration is cut short because this town hears the worst news imaginable. Interrupting this episode of Residue to introduce you to a new true crime show that I know you're going to enjoy.
They say the past was a simpler time. Kids rode their bikes till the streetlights came on. Neighbors looked out for one another, and everybody kept their doors unlocked. But for many families, this was not the reality. I'm Megan, host of A Simpler Time True Crime, where each week I revisit older unsolved cases from decades past, disappearances, suspicious deaths, and stories that were never fully told. Through a victim and survivor-centered lens, I challenge the idea that a simpler time meant a safer one, and give voice to those left behind. Because time doesn't erase the need for answers, and every case deserves a second look. Tune in each week and subscribe to A Simpler Time True Crime wherever you get your podcasts.
The body of 17-year-old Amy Hoffman was found in a water tank near Randolph Township. Amy's body was discovered floating in an old-fashioned holding tank deep in the woods. She was fully clothed, but the truth told a more horrifying story. Psychic Nancy Weber saw the headline, and then she thought something else. Nancy Weber says, "I saw a girl. She had been tortured, stabbed, left naked. I saw knife wounds all over her body." And so Nancy was left wondering, why did the newspaper article say that she was just found floating fully clothed? And Nancy Weber was right. Amy had been stabbed twice in the chest, One wound penetrated 7 inches through her lung, and her right ear was nearly severed. Amy had defensive wounds covering her hands, and there was evidence of sexual assault. This killer had stalked her, waited, and the evidence proved that he must have dragged her dying body through the woods, stabbed her first, then dragged her to that water tank because there was a trail of blood leading from the woods to that water tank. And how did Nancy Weber, the psychic, know all this? In most murder cases, police don't call psychics. They don't trust them, and this is usually for good reason. I mean, psychics can be vague or misleading, and psychics can also create false hope for families. They can also create dead ends that investigators end up chasing. But with Amy Hoffman, something was different. Nancy Weber wasn't just saying things that felt true. She described Amy's wounds in details that the police had not released to the press, to the public at all. And later, Nancy Weber is going to help these detectives in even greater ways, but we will get to that in a little bit. So far, there are no suspects, no DNA analysis they could rely on, just a vague image of a man in a green car and an entire town who is completely afraid. But it's only going to get worse because 10 days later on December 5th, 1982 in Mount Olive Township, Deirdre O'Brien, 25 years old. She is smart. She is a recent Seton Hall graduate. She is aspiring to be a museum curator. Deirdre was working her late shift at a restaurant called The Library, and this shift ended around midnight. She's walking to her car in the dark, alone, and she is also unaware that she is being watched and she is being followed. As Deirdre is driving home, her car is forced off the road by another vehicle, and the person in this vehicle gets out of his car. He abducts Deirdre. He grabs her, puts her into the trunk of his car, and then she was driven to a small rest area on Interstate 80. Now, this is about 30 miles away from where she was abducted. This guy drove around for about an hour. They get to a rest area. He forces her into the back seat of his car and made her strip down naked. She keeps fighting. She keeps fighting so hard that he just stabs her and threw her out of the car at the rest area, and then he just takes off. He leaves her there, bleeding and naked on the ground. Now, Deirdre has enough strength. She has enough determination to get herself to this vehicle that she sees parked a little bit farther away. This is a tractor trailer. She sees someone in the front seat, but this trucker is actually sleeping in his car, so he hasn't witnessed any of this. Now, Deirdre gets herself to that car. She is banging on the window. She is bloodied, naked. And this guy wakes up. He's like, oh my God. He quickly gets out of his car. He wraps Deirdre in a blanket and he gets her into his vehicle, and she has enough strength to tell him everything that happened. Deirdre is able to tell this trucker everything, details about what the man looked like, what his car looked like, every single thing that he did to her. And in between all of these details, she is still thanking this trucker beyond belief for helping her. And this trucker, he tried so hard to save Deirdre, but she died before help could get there. With the news of Deirdre's vicious murder, there is town-wide panic at this point. Within 10 days, 2 young women are viciously murdered. The town is in a panic. Newspapers read things like, "Don't ease up on vigilance, women. Women are urged to remain vigilant as the killer may still be at large." Self-defense classes exploded in this town. Pepper spray was selling out. A task force was launched and 100 detectives were assigned, and still no suspect, no names. And that would all change when one person decided to tell a lie. It is January 1983, and community members are raising money to encourage witnesses to come forward. And the reward for Amy reaches $8,500. The reward for Deirdre goes up to $24,000. Task force detectives are just certain that the killer is going to strike again. They are now on the hunt for a serial killer. Psychic Nancy Weber might be able to help, and Detective William Hughes decides that let's give it a shot. Let's call this Nancy Weber in. So detectives, they keep an open mind. They meet with Nancy, and Nancy tells detectives details that the public wouldn't know. Everything that she knew about Amy. And then the task force decides to bring Nancy to Deirdre's crime scene. And they want to kind of drive her around the towns and just see if anything sparks something inside of her. Detectives do inform Nancy that they do have one lead. Now, at the crime scene of where Deirdre was abducted from her car, forensic units did take an impression of a muddy tire track that was left beside Deirdre's abandoned car. So these tire tracks formed a distinctive pattern, and they had a casting of the tracks, but they couldn't find a match for this unique tread. Detectives take Nancy Weber on long drives in the country around all of the crime scenes, and at one point, Nancy she speaks up in the back seat and she says, "What town are we in now?" And the detectives tell her, "Well, we are in Mendham." And she says, "The suspect doesn't like this police department in this town. He doesn't like a guy that works in that police department. He can't stand him." She starts to describe that she had seen a police officer in that town stop an individual. And this individual she describes as being Eastern European, tall, dark hair, a chiseled chin, and she says that she can see a hard K in his last name, and that she only thinks, that his first name might be James, but she isn't sure. She says he comes from the Morristown area, but he went to Florida, and while he was living in Florida, he murdered someone and he went to jail. This psychic told these detectives all of these details. And detectives take her seriously. They're looking into this. They're about to go find out if this is something they can work with. But then, on January 16th, 1983, police get a strange 911 call. And this call is from a man that claims he's been stabbed. And his name, James Kadadich. Hard K. He says a car with flashing blue lights pulled him over, and the driver was upset with him, and they started arguing. And as James turned around to jump back into his vehicle, this driver stabbed him in the back. And it was a very clean, almost too clean, detectives said, superficial wound. So James calls 911 when he gets home to his parents' house. Now, this James Kadadich with a hard K, he was a 34-year-old supervisor at an apartment complex who lived with his mom and his stepdad. He runs into his mother's house and he says, "Oh my God, I've been stabbed." So they call the police. The police arrive at his house. James tells them the story. And while he's telling them his story, one of the detectives looks out his kitchen window and notices parked in the driveway in front of the house is a green Chevrolet. So what do? They call in the forensic unit right away, and they are able to match the tire tracks on that green Chevrolet parked outside to the tire tracks that were found at the scene of Deirdre's abandoned car. Nancy Weber, the psychic, she was right. James Kadadich didn't like somebody in the police department in that town. It is because he got pulled over for a traffic ticket, and after that situation and the interaction with the police officer, James felt like maybe the police were onto him. maybe they started figuring him out, so he thought the best way to get the police off of his trail would be to pretend that he also got stabbed by the serial killer running loose. But the guy literally just called police to his home to arrest him, because by the time they figure out that the tire tracks match, they're also able to now search his car, and forensics find Amy and Deirdre's hair in the back seat, in the trunk, and they also find blood. And so the seat covers and pieces of fabric from the car are sent to a lab in Washington, D.C., and now officers have enough evidence to arrest James Kadalich. I can never say his name, but you know what? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if we can't pronounce piece of shit serial killers' names. On January 19th, 1983, at 1:20 in the morning, Hard K is arrested and charged with the murder of 25-year-old Deirdre O'Brien. He is held on a $250,000 bond. While James is being held behind bars, months later on December 15th, 1983, he is then charged with the murder of Amy Hoffman. But while James is behind bars, you are going to learn so much more about James Kadalich. As Nancy Weber predicted, James Kadalich was Eastern European. He hated the Mendham police, and he spent some prison time in Florida because James had killed before, twice. In 1971, James was living in Florida. He had a roommate named Robert Anderson, and James' story goes that Robert Anderson made a move on him one night. The two argued, they fought. James ended up killing Robert Anderson, and then he hid his body in a closet. And now James is sent to prison. While he's in prison, he kills another inmate. But the court ruled this as self-defense, so James was never formally charged for killing that inmate. And then, while in prison, a Florida parole board released James from prison. They said he was okay, he's good to go. They released him, and then 5 months later, Amy Hoffman is murdered. So the seat covers and the pieces of fabric that were sent to a DNA lab, they come back positive for Deirdre O'Brien. So James is charged with Deirdre's murder, and he is going to be sentenced for that. There's going to be no trial. He's guilty. James pleaded guilty to Deirdre's murder, but he pleaded not guilty to Amy's murder. And so in an attempt to further torture Amy's friends and family, trial begins for Amy Hoffman's murder on October 9th, 1984. Fibers found on Amy's sweater and skirt did match fibers found in James' vehicle, but his defense team is going to argue that Amy worked in a clothing store. So we don't know where the fibers could have come from on her clothing. She was touching clothes all day. Very weak defense there. And then the defense brings in James' stepbrother, David Baldwin. He's called to the stand. He says that James was at home all night, the night that Amy went missing. He was home playing video games until 11 p.m. And then James' mother says the same thing, same alibi. James was at home playing video games. Another weak defense. So Dr. John Refner, he is the principal research microscopist for American Cyamunid. He takes the stand and says that the fibers found on Amy were similar, but they were not identical. And he also brings up the fact that Amy did work in a clothing store, so those fibers could have come from there. Then the defense also calls a man named Kevin Sheehan. Now, he was the assistant coach at the high school Amy attended. He used to make obscene phone calls to the cheerleaders, and he admits this on the stand. But the judge rules it inadmissible because none of Kevin's phone calls, prank calls, were ever made to Amy herself, and there was nothing to connect Kevin to Amy. As the trial ends, October 25th, 1984, at 11:20 a.m., the jury deliberates. And it took a day and a half for them to reach a verdict On October 26, 1984, James Kadadich is found guilty on all counts: killing in the course of kidnapping or aggravated sexual assault, knowing and purposeful murder, and then he was also convicted on possession of a dangerous weapon for unlawful purpose. In May 1985, James Kadadich is convicted, and he is initially sentenced to death, but then he is resentenced to 2 30-year terms with no chance of parole. Now, in 2018, James Kadadich, he asks the Innocent Project for help. And in the Daily Record, and now this is dated October 2nd, 2018, James Kadadich wants the Innocent Project's help to prove he did not rape and kill Amy Hoffman. He filed a motion in Superior Court on Morristown in November of 2018 to have his DNA compared with the semen found during Amy's 1982 autopsy. Now, this article states that the judge did grant James' request to test 2 laboratory slides that contained evidence from Amy Hoffman's murder. The state police laboratory attempted to test 1 slide, but because not enough material to create a DNA profile could be extracted, it could not be compared with James Kadadich's DNA. So a court-appointed attorney said that James didn't want the single remaining slide to be tested at the police lab. The Innocence Project, which works to clear prisoners of crimes through DNA evidence, was contacted to see if the group was interested in helping James find an independent lab to test this remaining slide. But the Innocent Project Communications Director, Paul Cate, said the nonprofit doesn't comment on individual cases unless and until it is committed to working on them. Out of this tragedy came something powerful. Deirdre's father, Richard, opened Deirdre's House, and this is a child advocacy center that has helped over 32,000 children. I'll have a link in the show notes, but on their website, it states Deirdre's House is the center in Morris County for child victims of abuse and or neglect and for children that have witnessed violence. Established in 1994, Deirdre's House is the only site in Morris County where a child victim can be interviewed and digitally recorded by law enforcement, medically examined, and treated by a pediatric abuse specialist. Children can be prepared for trial and clinically counseled in English or Spanish, all under one roof. Amy just finished her shift at the mall. Deirdre was finishing up her restaurant shift and just driving home. These were just 2 ordinary nights in a sleepy town. A safe, predictable, normal town. But sometimes the most terrifying threats. They hide in the safe, predictable, normal routines of our everyday life that we never question. Stay safe and stay paranoid.